Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. We begin with our land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that the ground on which we live is the traditional territory of Caldwell First Nation, of the Three Fires Confederacy, and the original people of Point Pelee and Pelee Island, and its surrounding lands and waters, and that of the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot peoples. We recognize and respect the First Nations who are stewards of the land and waters of Turtle Island and who have embraced this stewardship since time immemorial. We would also like to acknowledge the contributions of other nearby First Nation communities and all original people across Turtle Island. As we begin tonight's meeting, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of this week, a time when communities across Canada pause to remember. Remembrance Day is more than a date on the calendar. It's a reminder of the immense cost of the freedoms we enjoy here in this very room, the freedom to speak, to serve, and to shape the future of our community together. Those who served did so not for recognition, but for hope, the hope that future generations could live in peace, build families, and gather in places just like this without fear. Many never came home, and those who did often carried invisible burdens that stayed long after the battles ended. Their courage continues to echo through the choices we make as leaders and neighbors. It reminds us to act with gratitude, to listen with compassion, and to serve with integrity. As we begin our work this evening, may we do so in honor of all who have served, all we have lost, and all who continue to protect the peace they fought for. Please now join me in a moment of silent reflection, followed by the playing of our national anthem. Please stand for the playing of the national anthem. Okay, if we can get the adoption of our agenda for November 10th, 2025, regular meeting of council. Moved by Councillor Riccio Spagnolo, support by Councillor Carrick. All in favor? And that carries. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Deputy Mayor?
Your Worship, through my work, I'm bound by the CSPA, the new Policing Act, so I can't speak to item L, the notice of motion.
Any others? None? An adoption of our minutes from the regular and closed meetings of council held October 28th, 2025 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Segan, support by Councillor Reno. All in favor? And that carries. So, a few mayor's comments. As a reminder, tomorrow at 11 a.m., the town of LaSalle will host our annual Remembrance Day ceremony here at Cenotaph Park. The ceremony will be held in partnership with the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 594, and it is a time for our community to come together to honor and remember. I encourage everyone to join us as we pause together in gratitude and reflection. For those who are unable to attend in person, the ceremony will also be live streamed on the town's YouTube channel, and we now have a short video.
November 11th, the most unforgettable day of the year. A message from the Government of Canada.
Thank you. I'd also like to take a moment right now to recognize firefighter Kevin Simond, who concluded his distinguished career on November 6, 2025, after more than 30 years of exemplary service with LaSalle Fire. He was known affectionately in the fire hall as Uncle Kev. Kevin has been a steady and trusted presence within our department. His career with the town of LaSalle actually began when he was a teenager, working at LaSalle Centennial, our old ice rink on Front Road. And it's a full circle story because the last fire station he worked at was now standing at the very same site. Kevin's impact reaches far beyond Fireground. He has mentored countless younger firefighters, sharing his knowledge, experience, and wisdom. His dedication, leadership, and genuine care for others have left a lasting mark on our community. And as the saying goes, once a firefighter, always a firefighter. On behalf of council and the residents of LaSalle, I want to sincerely thank Kevin for his decades of service and wish him all the best in his well-deserved retirement. A reminder that this coming Monday is Mondays with the Mayor from 2 to 4 p.m. here at Town Hall. But if that time doesn't work for you, that's okay. Contact us and we'll arrange an appointment and time that works best. The same evening, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., we'll host the Town of LaSalle Open House in the lobby of the Volmar Complex. It's a great opportunity to learn more about the 2026 draft budget, the Parks, Rec, and Culture Master Plan, and to speak with staff from each department about the work being done in our community. So we hope everyone will join us at the Volmar Monday evening. Keep an eye out this week for details about LaSalle Holiday Lights Heritage Nights, including the tree lighting at the LaSalle Civic Center, the grand opening of the Loop and winter ice skating. It's a wonderful way to celebrate the season together. So look for those information coming soon. And finally, our budget sessions will take place on Thursday, November 27th, and if needed, Friday, November 28th, here in Council Chambers at the Civic Center. And these sessions are open to the public and will also be streamed live on the town's YouTube channel. So thank you. We have no public meetings or hearings. We don't have any presentations or delegations, so we're going into our staff reports, starting with item 1, our short-term rental background and issues report. Our Director of Planning and Development, Ms. Beggs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. As council will recall, we had some earlier direction to engage with WSP on a short-term rental regulatory framework. So we've been working with WSP representatives since September of this year. It's a project that's in collaboration with bylaw enforcement and council services. And the first part of the project is to complete a background study and emerging issues report. And we are here tonight with representatives of WSP to present that report to council and to get some additional feedback and input from members of council on a future regulatory program. So with that, I'll turn it over to WSP.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having us this evening. My name is Will Lamond. I'm a senior planner with WSP Canada, and I'm joined by my colleague Greg Benders, our director at WSP Canada. I'm the project manager on this project, the short-term rental study for the town, and Greg is supporting with many years of expertise on planning matters, but specifically having done a few of these studies as well, and bringing some I shouldn't say some, many lessons learned on this subject. So we have a relatively brief presentation to council and members of the public and admin today, basically to bring everybody up to speed on the work that's been done so far and our goals and objectives and the future outcomes of this study. And then afterwards, we'd be happy to take questions, feedback, answer questions, whatever, however we'd like to use the time. So, next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about what exactly we're doing with this study and why WSP has been engaged to help the town out with this. So, short-term rentals are a very specific type of land use. They are the use of private residences, dwelling units, for short-term as opposed to long-term accommodation. So, Typically, there's a number that's applied. Usually it's about 28 days or less, or 30 days or less, but essentially no more than a month of time where a home is rented out to guests. This can include typical what you would see on Airbnb or Vrbo, so entire homes or apartments or bedrooms, basement units rented out. Sometimes it's defined to include small inns or bed and breakfasts as well. There's quite a flexibility in the way that the framework is applied. So we've been brought on board to help support town staff in providing some recommendations on a regulatory framework for STRs in LaSalle. To date, as of our presentation today, we've done a background review. We've looked at various policy drivers for STRs specific to LaSalle and Essex County, as well as a broader range of practices in the province, looking at some of the sort of common regulatory choices and implementations. We're also looking at legal precedents that have set a few standards for the regulation of short-term rentals. That information was brought to the public in a public information session on October 23rd. We had a great conversation with a lot of folks from the community, got to hear a lot of feedback, and it was really important for developing our sort of key list of issues that need to be dealt with and addressed through the study. And then all of that information and our feedback that we received from the community was put into a background report, which summarizes all the information collected so far and basically gives us a roadmap for what is going to need to be addressed, and it lets us come up with a real made in LaSalle solution for STRs. Next slide, please. So, as I noted, the first little bit that we've been working on is looking at some best practices for regulating STRs. What we need to do is identify issues and gaps where the town currently doesn't regulate short-term rentals and where the town could. And then the outcome of our work is going to be the recommendation of a regulatory framework. And that's going to involve likely amendments to the town's official plan and zoning bylaw, as well as some recommendations for a potential licensing framework under the Municipal Act, which would be undertaken by town staff based on those recommendations. The project work plan is relatively concise. You can see we're on task 3, as you see on the slide. So following this work, we'll be putting together a recommendation report and then coming back to council at a public meeting with that report and some proposed implementing amendments. And that is targeted for Q1 2026. Next slide, please. So short-term rentals fall into a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to policy and municipalities' ability to regulate. It's both a planning matter and an outside of planning matter. So there are basically two kind of key areas that we have to consider STRs, or two lenses. So the first is planning. So the Planning Act governs everything that municipalities do related to land use and infrastructure in the province. It has a couple matters of provincial interest, which I think are important to highlight in the sort of context of STRs. So ensuring safe and healthy community development, providing a full range of housing, and that includes affordable housing, resolution of various planning conflicts that are between public and private interests, and determining appropriate location for growth and development. So all of those kind of have to come into play when we're thinking about planning for short-term rentals, and especially how it interacts with supply of housing in the town. In addition, we have to consider the tools and the direction for the town under the Municipal Act. So in particular, the Municipal Act grants municipalities the ability to create licensing regimes, and that is typically the way that short-term rentals are formerly regulated, is through licensing. Additionally, there is the municipal accommodation tax, which I know that the town is in the midst of considering an implementation framework for. And so those are two things that are under the act, the Municipal Act, that are being considered in this work. Just to sort of touch a little bit more on the policy framework, I'm going to talk about what we sort of have to think about from the provincial level through the new provincial planning statement, and then just some considerations from local contexts in both Essex County and LaSalle. So the provincial planning statement was released in the fall of last year, right around this time, basically. It replaces the previous provincial policy statement, and it's laying out an implementation framework and policy framework related to those matters of provincial interest that are in the Planning Act. The PPS doesn't really talk a lot about accommodation or not even really tourism much. It's mostly focused on local affairs. So it does direct municipalities to plan for a range of housing options and to provide enough housing supply to meet future needs, and that includes affordable housing. It also encourages land use that is efficient and supports the use of existing infrastructure and transit. There are some economic policies that are related to tourism, but I would say that that's not the focus of the PPS. Next slide, please. When it comes to the local policy context, several sort of just notable pieces of policy that are in both the county official plan and the town's official plan. So the county's OP encourages tourism and diverse housing and accommodations, including bed and breakfasts. And it promotes these near settlement areas, as well as making use of natural heritage in the county. So there is some direction, but it's not overtly prescriptive in the county's OP. LaSalle does not currently regulate STRs in any way in its official plan, but there are permissions for bed and breakfasts in rural agricultural areas and in residential districts. And those have to go through a few extra planning steps requiring site plan approval. And they need to demonstrate certain things like protection of privacy, adequate parking for guests. Next slide, please. So this also kind of connects to some non-OP parts of LaSalle's planning. So the strategic plan does have a focus on a lot of things that are related to the planning policy, the land use planning policy. So housing, quality of life, economic development, and that does include tourism as well. And then the zoning bylaw, like the OP, currently does not regulate STRs. It doesn't define them either, but again, it also does regulate visitor accommodations, so bed and breakfasts, but as well country inns. So there is some precedent for us to draw on when it comes to looking at how we regulate STRs in the town. We're not going from a completely blank slate. Next slide, please. So we've done a broad best practice review. We've also drawn on an experience that we have working in other municipalities doing similar studies for SDRs. And these next two slides, I'm going to go over a few of the options and approaches. And one thing I'd like to highlight is that the town has quite a lot of flexibility in what you choose to regulate and how you choose to regulate short-term rentals. A lot of planning matters are really driven by certain requirements under provincial policy, whereas STRs, there's not really a provincial framework or sort of a roadmap that must be followed. So a lot of it is really drawing on what's worked really well for other municipalities, and so that's what we can kind of look at here. So this is some of the approaches that other municipalities have taken. So one is to permit STRs only in certain areas. Currently, the zoning bylaw in the town doesn't define them, but it could only permit STRs, for example, in certain zones. So only permitting them in commercial areas or only permitting them in residential areas. Additionally, STRs could be limited to only accessory uses. So typically we would call this owner occupied or non-owner occupied, where the primary or where the SDR has to be operated out of the principal residence or primary residence of the owner or operator. That would not allow for somebody to, say, buy a dwelling unit and operate it as a short-term rental without actually living in it permanently. Next slide, please. Another option is to only permit SDRs in certain contexts. So rather than limiting it to certain designations or zones within the planning framework of the town, there's the option of only allowing them in certain areas where, say, historically they were permitted. I mean, this is something that we've seen in quite a few different municipalities. We've got Blue Mountains as an example here. Because the Ontario Municipal Board, what is now called the Ontario Land Tribunal, supported this kind of regulation in Blue Mountain, where there was an existing cottage industry, existing industry of renting cottages out, cottage industries. This is something that is absolutely permitted, it's allowed. It's been done in other municipalities as well, where an existing area that really would be suitable for short-term rentals in the determination of the municipality, that's where they're limited to. And then one thing that we've seen, as I was sort of alluding to with talking about the Municipal Act, is that most municipalities that are choosing to regulate STRs are doing it through a licensing regime, either instead of or in addition to a planning framework. We would certainly recommend the planning framework is pretty important for setting the basis for the licensing regime, in defining the uses and really establishing where they're permitted. But planning can only go so far, and the licensing allows for quite a lot of additional regulation. So managing enforcement, requiring certain inspections or other conditions to be met that through the normal planning process or building permit process may not be as easy to regulate. Licensing really gives a chance to keep an eye on everything and register in a way that planning alone doesn't have the ability to. Next slide, please. So based on our information session that we held on the 23rd, as well as some letters and comments we've received from the community, we've identified a few key concerns. And one thing I'll note here is that one of the difficulties with short-term rentals is that in the absence of any sort of registration system or licensing system, it is really hard to know exactly how many are operating in your community. It's hard to know the number, but also the type, and it's a bit of an opaque process without any sort of formal registration. So town staff have done a really good job, I think, of trying to scrape and see and get a count, but a lot of the information is unreliable on the sites, and so learning and hearing from the community about their experiences with STRs is really important for us getting a good amount of information. So I wanted to express some gratitude to those members of the community who so far have provided some feedback and information. So just sort of in no particular order, some of the key issues that we've heard about are negative impacts on the neighborhoods. So some common complaints have been increased noise from SDRs, parking problems, traffic congestion, property neglect, and this was, whether it's specific to a few bad actors or whether it's endemic of the whole. Every STR in LaSalle, no one can really say, but it's we heard enough from residents that it's definitely something that people are talking about and experiencing. In addition, in a sort of related way, community safety. We heard from a few residents about police being called, sometimes repeatedly, to the same SDRs, and that there's a feeling that they're really threatening the safety, or at least the sort of family-friendly atmosphere of a lot of neighborhoods in the towns. In the town, I should say. Another concern that we heard was about housing stability and affordability. And I will say this is not unique to LaSalle. It's the driving force behind a lot of STR regulation across the province and across the country. So there's, a perception, or, there's a feeling in the community that the more SDRs there are, the the lower the housing stock is in terms of availability of long-term rental options, which can only worsen the housing crisis. Economic considerations, there were some, the balance between supporting tourism and the economic considerations of the negative effects of the STRs is something that needs to be considered in this process. And some members of the public did note that they were skeptical of the broad economic benefits of SDRs, and that there was a feeling that really it was a net negative. And actually, we'll go to the next slide because that really relates to the sort of other piece that we heard, which was that we heard from a lot of folks that they really felt that LaSalle is not facing the kind of tourism pressures that other municipalities, even here in Essex County or elsewhere in the province, might be facing, and that shouldn't be the primary consideration when permitting SDRs, and that that shouldn't take precedent over the needs of the community. And then there was a preference for caution. So we did hear from some attendees at the public information session and a few comments as well that were written in that there was a need for consideration and for oversight and regulation, but that perhaps steps could be taken that were iterative in nature. I'll also note that we heard from quite a lot of folks when we were speaking in person that there wasn't nobody felt that they had any sort of baseline objection to short-term rentals at the core, and that mostly it was these non-owner occupied short-term rentals that seemed to be the problem, at least anecdotally. It's the places that are not being lived in permanently, but are owned and operated purely for short-term rental use. So we heard some people suggested somebody who lives in their house and is renting out their basement on a short-term rentals. That isn't a problem, but the house that's the party house, quote unquote, that is causing a lot of noise issues or traffic issues or parking issues or worse, safety issues, those are the ones that folks are really concerned about. So some regulatory suggestions came from the community as well, which we thought it was worth raising. So some folks felt that SDRs should be limited to commercial and tourism zoned areas, while others did note that residential areas would be acceptable for SDRs, but really that they would love to see that the operators only be allowed to be full-time residents of that dwelling. There were feelings that enforcement should be leading the way as well, and that there should be pretty strict licensing and insurance requirements as well. And then that enforcement needed to be occurring through penalties or demerit points or some sort of system that would be effective in reducing the concerns. Operating without a license or operating an SDR when not actually living in the dwelling, anything that would be a violation of the licensing bylaw. Folks really noted that they would love to see a strict and effective enforcement scheme. Next slide, please. So all of that information that we've collected through our background review, best practices, and hearing from the community, we have laid out for ourselves and for town staff and now for council and the public, a bit of a roadmap for what we need to think about and where we need to come up with some recommendations and suggestions. So the first of all, as I said, starting from the sort of planning bedrock of the official plan and the zoning bylaw is in our opinion the best way to start, and then build everything on top of there. So as I noted, the town only currently regulates bed and breakfasts. So that the first step will be defining an SDR in the town's planning framework, and further really being clear about the type of use they are. Are they a commercial use? Are they an accessory use? Are they a residential use? And putting that guidance directly into the official plan and the zoning bylaw. types of STRs is another question. Some municipalities distinguish short-term rentals and bed and breakfasts as different uses. They treat them differently and they regulate them differently. Other municipalities bring them all together under one framework. So that's something that's going to have to be decided. Is whether that's the best way to go is to treat them all the same or treat them uniquely. And again, we have lots of examples to draw on. Even here within Essex County, there's been a few different approaches depending on which municipality you're looking at, as well as the City of Windsor. Principal residence question. So, it'll have to be decided whether, just dwelling units, which are primary residences or principal residences, will be permitted to be SDRs, whether there's any flexibility for non-primary residences to operate as SDRs. Again, a lot of municipalities have different approaches, and there's some municipalities that do have a bit of a hybrid approach where only in residential areas, SDRs in residential areas can only be primary residences, but in more commercial areas, they're potentially permitted to be non-primary as well. And then last slide, please. Just a couple more considerations is where to permit SDRs, so their location. So whether the town permits them across the entire town of LaSalle, only in certain areas or contexts, or an outright ban altogether. And then finally, licensing and enforcement. So this starts to move away from the land use planning framework and into the licensing framework. So consideration will have to be given to how the licensing regime could work, how enforcement of STRs and STR rules could occur. And again, there's lots of best practices to draw on, and our team at WSP can provide some recommendations. But this will also be something that that the town's planning and legal team can take as well. So next slide, please. Just to kind of wrap up and look ahead to the next final couple pieces of work on the project. So our team will wrap up a recommendations report. As I noted, this will build on everything we've looked at so far and really lay out what our recommendations are that are specific to LaSalle for official plan policy, zoning, and then the future licensing as needed. And then in February, we plan to present that report and some supporting amendments to council at a public meeting. And that'll be another opportunity for the community to hear, listen, and provide their own feedback on the proposals. Okay, that concludes the presentation. I would, love to hand the floor back over to council. We're here to hear any feedback you might have or answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Members of council, do you have any questions or comments about the report? Okay. Councillor Renaud and then Deputy Mayor Akapata.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before I became a councillor, my dad was a councillor, and he said a lot of times when you have a decision, and I know this isn't a decision yet coming to us, but to look at it as what you would like and how you would like to be treated, and to look at things through your own eyes. And I read a lot of the comments that were provided on Place Speak, as well as I spoke to some people, and it's pretty much the way I see things. I love going to other municipalities and using bed and breakfasts and using short-term rentals and Airbnbs, but I wouldn't necessarily invite one next to me, knowing some of the problems that can arise. And I see you're going to have lots of different ways of mitigating that, and that's great. And it seems like one of the biggest things that comes back into the conversation and is included in your report tonight is the idea of owner occupied. And so if you break it down to owner occupied versus, let's just say, corporate. So a corporation from out of town that owns a bunch of houses, or even somebody that owns 3 or 4 houses, and it's more of a business for them. Do you have any idea what the breakdown, not just in LaSalle, but in the industry in general, would you say it's 50-50, it's 75% owner-operated? Like, I don't think a lot of people would have a problem with the lady next door who's lost her husband and has some room in her basement, and she rents out her basement every weekend for hockey tournaments. I don't think they have so much of a problem with that. They have more of a problem with these companies that are just click online, send the cleaner the day after, and our hands are clean. Do you have any idea what kind of breakdown we should be expecting when we start looking at this? Do you have any data on that?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I may throw it to my colleague Greg to talk on this as well. We wouldn't have data on that in LaSalle, and I'm not sure in terms of other places, but the one thing I can say is that the more common approach for sure is to limit non-owner occupied residences. So, you know, most of the major cities that have implemented STR regulation are either restricting or outright prohibiting non-owner occupied STRs. Now, enforcement is the other side of that, right?
Right.
But generally, I would say, you know, the pendulum is much more towards non-owner occupied than the other way around. But Greg, if you have thoughts.
Through the mayor to Councillor Reno, it's a good question. I think the answer would be somewhat speculative based on just experience. I don't think we have actual numbers, but I can say in my experience, the pressure to have an STR is very much a vacant dwelling that people can rent. And as Will mentioned, the response from most municipalities are, we've done this work across the province, and in our experience, most people don't have an issue with an owner-occupied unit that's being rented out or on a short-term basis. It is the ones that are generally vacant, which in many municipalities they've called them sort of dark streets, where the subdivision that they're in, you know, perhaps isn't occupied and represents a gap in the neighborhood. Notwithstanding that's, you know, many people's preference to rent a place, the response from municipalities is very much to have owner-occupied, which generally is more accepted than the vacant dwellings.
So would you say that from what you've seen out there, most municipalities have moved to that owner-occupied, and they don't allow? Would you say that's the majority of the ones that are owner-occupied? Is that? And
through the mayor to Councillor Reno, that seems to be the case in our experience. Yeah, it's very much a owner-occupied. They're all regulated, because in order to actually define where they can be operated in a municipality, they have to be through a licensing framework in order for them to be regulated. The vast majority is pushing for owner-occupied units. I know, again, as I mentioned, I know from the industry standpoint, that's not what people are looking for, but from an enforcement standpoint and a general acceptance, it's owner-occupied.
And one final question: when they are claiming to be owner-occupied and they come down and they register as owner-occupied, yet on Airbnb you see 4 or 5 that all have the same corporate name behind them, how do we enforce something like that? I mean, do we go in and take a head count? Do we kick people out? Like, where's this moving towards? If somebody comes in and says, yeah, I live there, but they really don't, how do we mitigate that for our own community?
And through the mayor to Councillor Reno, it's very much how your licensing bylaw is written. Enforcement is key. Many would say that the majority of the problems that people face from these particular uses can be enforced through existing bylaws, noise, property standards, lighting, so on, parking. The enforcement's key because, I mean, I can't speak for LaSalle, but I would suggest many municipalities are quite constrained when it comes to bylaw enforcement. So as part of the licensing framework, the revenue generated through that can actually pay for the enforcement through the licensing framework. But it's very much, you know, how the bylaw is written. Just like any other bylaw, it's complaint driven, but also would also have a framework established to do inspections. Again, getting into the weeds a bit, it's how you write it. So the owner shall be, you know, the principal address at X street, and which is coincident with the rental.
Okay, one final question, and I won't put you on the hot seat. I'll put Dominic on the hot seat. Would this then move into the AMPS program? Have you given any thought to that for enforcement wise? Does that end up into the AMPS program, and do we have to rewrite that bylaw with all the other bylaws that we'll have to rewrite?
Through you, your worship, I haven't been involved with this portion of short-term rental research, so I would have to get back to you on that before I give a definitive answer there.
Okay, I respect that. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Capata?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, my question is about enforcement. I used to be a copper, so I'm sitting here going, I tell you I live here, prove it. Prove that I don't. How do these other municipalities prove? So I've got the house in my name, my driver's license is registered there, I've got 4 or 5 other houses, and I'm next door or down the street. So before we embark on this, the last thing I want, I've heard the residents, we had a gentleman here who was crystal clear in what went on with him next door. How do you prove that that's my primary residence? I'm just trying to understand how these other municipalities have done it, because I'm just, like you said, enforcement's gonna be the key, but there's no point in writing a bylaw that by default, I pulled up the charter, it's gonna be very difficult for our folks to even step on the property if they believe an offense has taken place and enforce unless our bylaws allow them to do it. So I do wanna get in the weeds, because the last thing I wanna do is start a discussion that is going to have the police chief rolling his eyes at me and our bylaw enforcement people going, that's wonderful, Mike, but we don't know how we're gonna do it. So if you could speak to what other municipalities have done, sir, and we'll do our research that way.
And through the mayor, very, very good question. I think part of that, Councillor, I'd like to take back and provide you with a bit more of a robust response. Rather than me speculating a little bit based on what others are doing, I think we should probably tie that and put a bow on it for you.
More than acceptable. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Regis Spagnolo?
Thank you, through you. Just a question, is there a limit of how many short-term rentals a town our size can accept? That's one question.
Through the mayor to the councillor, no. Some municipalities put caps on them, others don't. I will say in almost all the cases that I've seen, the number is a bit of a number in people's heads. Like, there's no right or wrong number. It's what perhaps that municipality had at that time, but it is up to the municipality.
Okay, and then I know it's been spoken about, but regarding the enforcement, so that would be the enforcement on our part, right? Like with bylaw, policing, the town administration, they would be the ones that would be enforcing the demerit points that you alluded to. That would be something that we would be taking care of, correct?
And through the mayor to the councillor, that's correct.
Councillor Carrick?
Thank you, Your Worship. So a lot of the stuff's been answered, but I just have a couple questions. So if we're going into, say, commercial or tourism areas versus residential, I guess the concern is if we don't do some planning / licensing, you have to kind of do both, because one doesn't make sense. I mean, to be honest with you, in order to chase it around. So we have bylaws. Our bylaw officer can go in somebody's property and say, hey, listen, this isn't right. So I'm assuming this could be kind of the same thing if it's planning and licensing at the same time. So I think that's a future, because you don't want other zones to be pushed to other zones. So if it's just commercial and or commercial and tourism, it's going to go to residential, it's already there. So how do we help look at that? And it's easy to say we don't want it, but it's happening. So how do we, and I understand this is early in the process and you're going to come back with a report, but the concern to me is we need something, and residents need to be protected. And with our town people, through what we can do, planning and licensing, it's absolutely necessary as far as I'm concerned, because you can't have it going on forever, and it's going to go happen illegally, so I'd rather have a mechanism in place where we can actually try to control it or enforce some of the stuff. Thank you.
And through the mayor to the councillor, so I was mentioning about, the where, which certainly you can do in an official plan or zoning bylaw, but what it can't do, planning can't go backwards, it's not retroactive. So in order to actually correct or regulate existing uses, you have to apply a licensing framework, which would require every operator to have a license, and that would ideally correct the problem issue or the problem areas. So you can go into the areas perhaps where they're not going to be located and say, sorry, we don't allow this through that particular exercise. Without the licensing framework, you can't do that.
Councillor Segan?
Through you, Mayor Malash. I'm going to be doing enforcement part 5 now, it sounds like, because that seems to be one of our biggest concerns. First of all, I want to thank you for your poster presentation that you did at the Volmer. I thought it was excellent, very informative. Personally, I'd like to see more people there, but a lot of the people who have probably the most obvious concerns were there and made some good points. So thank you for that, and because we have, our residents are really passionate actually about this, because I heard that going door to door. This issue was was up there as far as one of the ones that concerned them the most about where LaSalle is going, as far as how we're going to take care of our residents so that they can enjoy the quality of life that they deserve to have. So my question is, and I'll leave out the parts I think most of that have been said already, under that regulatory suggestion section where you mentioned implementing penalties for noncompliance, demerit points, fines, how effective, from your experience, maybe anecdotally, because it really doesn't come into the report, but how effective really is it? Or is it just, the price of doing business and people will eat the fines and eat the whatever other penalties there might be? Has that been an issue like that? Because, let's be honest about in some businesses, if they're not as honest, for lack of a better term, and they go down that road as far as, basically, the price of doing business, I said earlier. Do you find that you ran into that with any of your consultations and research that you did into this topic?
Through the mayor to Councillor Second. I think it's a really good point. The fine system for many things does just become the cost of doing business. And I would say there's a couple things. One is that, the licensing and the registration aspect of this is really sunlight is the best disinfectant kind of thing, right? It gives the town oversight and allows for, really understanding how many are and where they are. The actual enforcement, the demerit point system, I think is interesting. I don't think, not every municipality has done it, but it's pretty common because it's a little bit of an extra stick. There's the fine, but then the demerit point system the idea is eventually if you hit enough, then your license will be revoked and you won't be able to operate that STR anymore. And that's not to say that a bad actor can not get around that, but it all comes down to how, again, I think like Rick was referencing, how the bylaw is written, how the enforcement system is implemented. Again, I know your solicitor noted that he'll be having to look into the AMP question, but that whole system is part of it as well. And I don't think, I personally can't speak with expertise on enforcement and bylaw and AMPs or anything, but I do know that the demerit point system hand in hand with the fine system is a bit more effective than it's simply a fine.
All right, thank you, because I do agree with Deputy Mayor Ekpata that enforcement is going to be a key factor in any policy that we develop. Thank you.
Councillor Burns?
Yeah, I rented one of these in Burlington. There's no owner in the house. There's no requirement in Burlington to have that. So I really don't see that as a big thing for the owner to live in the residence, because I brought my family there for the Grey Cup. There was 11 of us, 6 bedrooms, was plenty of room and accommodations for parkings. Again, we through Airbnb. That's how we rented it. We weren't a nuisance to the neighborhood. But my question is, how many of these, or is there a policy that says that a street, no matter how long the street is, but if it's by block, you can have 1 or you can have 21 on the street, which would concerns me by too much intensification in one neighborhood. So if I were to look where the smaller homes are in LaSalle, I could buy a whole block of Ream or Victory or Laurier, roughly $500,000 a house, and then rent them all out. Do you have any experience with that, or do you have any guidelines anywhere that restricts that per block? Because you're now going to change the neighborhood for the one person that lives there that is not part of it. Thank you.
And through the mayor to the councillor, I can tell you when we did the work in Prince Edward County, about 6 years ago, which was not the only first, but one of the first that sort of really looked to regulate in a more robust way their short-term rental industry. We looked at all sorts of options, but intensity is one of the ones that you're talking about, or how density in terms of how many per area. We looked at that as an option, using separation distances. The challenge with that is that it doesn't always work, because in some areas it depends on the particular area of the zone that we're really looking at. It is an option, but I found that it's also a bit exclusionary. So, for instance, you might have, if you don't have one in a particular area, people might rush to get a license in that area, and then it's sort of, there's a bit of a freeze or an area that you're not going to be able to get into. I'm not suggesting it doesn't work. It's an option that we could certainly consider. But I don't know many municipalities where they've done it, other than one where they've considered, which is Prince Edward County.
Comment rather than a statement. I believe in enforcement. The stiffer the fines, the better. As you take the profit out of it, they're not going to break the laws. Just handing somebody a $100 fine because you didn't comply and $100 for a license, I'll break the laws every day. It happens as we see in our driving a car. You're willing to go 30 over and pay the fine, that's no big deal till you get the fifth one and then you don't have a license. Or if you get a 40 to 50 over and then we take your car and we fine the heck out of you and you can't have it for 7 days. So light enforcement needs to be, I think, written into our bylaw, what the enforcements are going to be, what the penalties are expected. And I would go so far as to say, I wouldn't even mind them have to be hung on the wall in the rental unit, and it should be to both parties, the one who's causing the problem and the owner who allowed it. That's two ways of getting them. If I'm only going to fine the owner, I don't care if I broke the law, it didn't cost me anything. So I don't know what protections they have because I'm not in that business, but just a thought, and I don't know if anybody's done that in any type of research, but it'd be interesting if you bring that back. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any other questions or comments? I have lots, but I'm actually going to save them for the next report because I think that's when they're going to be more important to answer them. I think the biggest part of all this is ensuring that whatever program we come up with is something that's manageable for our staff and something that we can actually enforce. And so I did note one of the comments was from a resident saying they think this is unnecessary, that we should wait until more STRs come on board and it actually becomes a problem. But I don't think they realize that it is a problem for some of our residents, and that I would rather personally, and I think council feels the same, that we'd get ahead of the problem and have these things in place so that it doesn't come to the point where other municipalities have, and now they're trying to fix things that they almost can't fix. So I thank you for the report. I thought it was fantastic. I thought you included a lot of information, but all of my questions will be for your next report, and I look forward to that come the new year. So thank you very much for the presentation. If there's no other questions, the recommendation for this evening is just to receive the report of the Director of Planning and Development dated October 22nd, 2025 regarding short-term rental background information and corresponding presentation by WSP Canada Inc. be received. Moved by Councillor Richo-Spagnuolo and support by Councillor Burns. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Okay, moving on. Item 2 is the Handy Transit Agreement update, and our Director of Finance, Mr. Langlois.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. So this report, I just wanted to give council kind of an update where we stand with the Handy Transit Agreement. The current one's been expired for some time. Moving forward, with our records management positions and whatnot, once it comes to expiry well in advance, we'll start working on it. But the agreement really isn't going to change substantively. Actually, since writing this report, I've heard back from the, general manager at Handy Transit with the draft agreement, and they've agreed to pretty much all the proposed changes. The only difference, there's a couple verbiage, minor items, but they're, instead of a 10-year term in the agreement, they're looking at a 4-year term, which is fine with me. But more of what I really wanted to talk about tonight was the financial aspect of the agreement. So in the current agreement, it does state that, right now, currently the users pay $5.25 per ride, and the town, for the longest time, we've paid $18.70 per ride. We've subsidized that. And that has historically been enough to cover the operating costs. Kind of a little bit of a surprise to me when we've been meeting. It came to my attention that there's been a shortfall for a number of years. And included in the agreement, it does state that if there is a shortfall, we true it up and there's a retro payment. Now, since the inception of the agreement, we've never had to make an additional payment. But and since COVID, the ridership has significantly went down and the cost of operations have significantly increased. So with that being said, there is a shortfall, a significant shortfall. And kind of going back and forth after this, we've agreed to go back 3 years instead of 5 or 6 years, which would have been significantly more money. So there is a retroactive payment that we're going to have to make of $191,000, which again was a surprise to me. We're going to fund that from our accessibility reserve. We have a healthy reserve, which items like this is typically would be used for. And then moving forward, through discussions with their general manager to mitigate this going forward, we're going to have to increase our municipal budget by about $45,000. That's in the proposed 2026 budget. I did review their audited financial statements to make sure that everything matches and kind of did my own little audit to make sure their calculations are accurate, which they are. But going forward, by May of the following year, they're going to provide me with their financial statements and their reconciliation. So if there is an amount owing, or if ridership numbers go up and there's an amount we get back, we reconcile that every year so that there's no surprises moving forward. And then we've also included a clause that we can now, rather than waiting until the agreement expires, with I think 3 months notice, we can change our ridership fee if we want to raise it from $5.25 per ride. So those, I wanted to bring that to council's attention because it is a significant dollar amount which hadn't been planned for. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Carrick?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification, so next steps, mitigation measures, the number one, the proposed 2026 budget, you mentioned handy transit services, $45,000, provide a buffer, you're looking at a 4-year term, so does that $45,000 take care of the 4 years, or is that just 1 year at a time?
That's our increase in the annual budget.
So every year?
Yeah, so it's going from about $65,000 to $110,000.
So if we accept the 525 ridership, and we're on the hook for 45 grand a year.
Yeah,
Not saying
and-
that's a bad thing or a good thing, I mean.
And our
people
price
need
per-
assistance, but.
Yeah, our subsidy, we're gonna now, instead of $18.70, it's gonna be $45 a trip,
Yeah.
which is significant. We have looked in, the question is, do we need to provide this service? And
sorry.
the answer is yes. If you provide a conventional transit service, you are required to accommodate, under the AODA and accessibility rules, you are required to accommodate people with special needs. So, not that we're looking at getting rid of the service at all, but that is a question that I expect to be asked.
So one final question, where do we get the numbers from? How do we know who's using it? And the droppings, like, where does that come from?
So I
So
get,
that we can prepare better
Yep.
or have a better understanding of what's coming.
yeah, I get a report, their audited financial statements from Handy Transit, and I actually did meet with their auditor as well to walk through the numbers. So they provided me with the last 3 to 5 years of financial statements that have been audited by the auditors, and the ridership numbers they've also looked at in their system, so those numbers are accurate as well.
Okay, so I guess what I'm kind of looking for is future ridership, where is it coming from? Who's riding? What pool? Is it expanded? Do we have any idea how that works?
Ridership numbers have decreased. So basically anyone with a accessibility need can call Handy Transit and request a ride. And, it's kind of like water. The more water you use, the more those overhead costs are shared. So the higher the ridership, it does actually cost less.
So my final comment then is, how do we get to more people out there that could use the service?
We could advertise it.
Okay, thank you.
just to the counselor's question, not everyone is eligible to use this service. There's a pre-qualification process that is followed. Folks call in, and there's a questionnaire that the folks at Handy Transit administer. So you need to be eligible for the service before you actually can use the service.
So I have Councillor Segan, Councillor Burns, then Councillor Reno.
Thank you, through your worship, to Mr. Langlois. I think you already answered my question. These fees are for one way?
That's correct.
Okay. Second question. Any discussion involving any partnerships potentially with neighboring municipalities in order to make it more feasible as far as the cost?
I haven't reached out. Right now, the service is only provided to LaSalle and Windsor. So I could reach out to it. That'd probably be more through Handy Transit to look at additional municipalities who might be interested. So I could definitely, reach out to their general manager and see if there's an appetite for that. Like, I know the more riders there are, there's a point where you need more vehicles as well. So I don't know where that magic number is to benefit, to get the maximum benefit with the most number of riders without having to buy a bunch more vehicles, but I could definitely reach out.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's just a suggestion because I heard from some residents about the neighboring municipalities, Amherstburg, for instance, they have it. If we could pull it together and come up with some kind of partnership, maybe it might be, a little bit more feasible. So thank you.
Councillor Burns?
Yeah. I guess when I look at what we pay and what the client pays, it's probably been 20 years since we've adjusted the figures. It would be certainly interesting to see if these figures include Windsor and us at the same rate, and if not, what rates to Windsor charge for the same service. And I think at some point we have to raise our rates here, even though it's they're vulnerable people. But we're at the point where we're subsidizing this by $45, $46 per ride. And when I look at the figures, number of trips per year, 32,000, that's quite a bit, if that's ours. Or is it the ones in the box provided by LaSalle is only 2,500, but still substantial. It may be too late for this budget, but I think at some point I would like to see a report come back to see how long we've been at these figures and what sort of recommendation administration brings back to us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll, we did leave it the same for right now because I did want to speak to council about this first, and I think that's appropriate. In future budgets, we can look at increasing the rate, and then it's all, where we want to start at, and then I think an inflationary increase annually is always a reasonable strategy to increase the rate.
Councillor Reno?
Just in the same vein, Dale, considering we're kind of partners in this with the City of Windsor, they use them as well. How much influence would we have on raising that cost to the rider? Would it be different in LaSalle, different in Windsor? Would we be able to set our price if we wanted to continue them here?
Yeah, we can set whatever rate we'd like.
Councillor Riccio Spagnuolo?
Thank you, through you, to Mr. Langlois. Have we ever looked at other transportation providers such as CareLink or any of those? They may be a little bit more cost efficient for us. I don't know if that's, I know we've had contracts with them, with Handy Transit, not trying to take away from them, but if we've ever explored any other options.
We haven't. That's something I could definitely look into. I'm not sure how many there are out there, but that's something I could easily find out and get some information on.
I can also provide you with a few names as well.
Thanks.
From when I used to work at Harmony in Action, which is an organization for people with disabilities. We used to have CareLink and a couple other transportation providers that would come in, so I can provide you with those contacts.
Thanks.
Any other questions? There are none. I guess my question is more to the rider's fee that we're currently going to charge. We're leaving that as is for 26 and then we'll revisit it for 27. Is that the suggestion at this point?
That's correct. When I was talking to the general manager, there's room to increase a little bit comparatively, and just with some experiences with raising it. Although it is only $5.25, like I think one of the top rates at other municipalities in Ontario is $7 and something cents. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to make a lot of a difference on our budget with 2,500 rides. If we upped it to $7, we can get $5,000 more, so it's not an immediate need, but I'd like to do a little bit more research and then come back for the 2027 budget, and then we can look at other options as well and see where we want to end up.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping for. So if we could have that report before 2027 with maybe if there are other options out there and maybe a plan going forward, as you mentioned earlier, where inflation increase each year so that the users also know what to expect each year going forward. So if there's no other questions or comments, recommendation is that the report of the Director of Finance dated October 14th, 2025 regarding the Handy Transit Agreement update be received, and that Council approve a retroactive payment to Handy Transit Windsor in the amount of $191,284 for the years 2022, 2023, and 2024 to be funded from the town's accessibility reserve. Moved by Councillor Reno, support by Councillor Segan. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Item 3 is our Vipers request for facility modifications. I'll turn it over to our Director of Culture and Rec, Ms. Finero.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. The report before you tonight is regarding a request from the LaSalle Vipers to make 2 modifications to the Vollmer facility. One of those is to construct a wall with 2 doors at the end of the arena dressing room hallway. And the second is to install cabinets, do electrical work, and painting in dressing room 12, with all of the costs for those modifications to be taken care of by the Vipers. So in terms of the construction of the wall with 2 doors, this would be at the west end of the dressing room hallway. The purpose of this enhancement is to enhance their team branding, create a sense of privacy and exclusivity on game nights. There are some renderings in your report, and I will just share my screen briefly so that you can see them on screen as well. Apologies. Oh, there we go. Just a little bit delayed there. So this would be the rendering of the door with the team branding on it. You can see the white marks there. That would be the outlines of where the 2 doors would be. The doors would only be closed at previously agreed upon times between the Vipers and the town. And there would be a locking mechanism that keeps the doors locked open when not in use. So during practices and games is when the doors would be closed, and the remainder of the time they would remain open. They would also be equipped with crash bars, as it is a fire exit. So in the event that there needed to be an evacuation, people would be able to access those doors. The second renovations that they would like to do is in dressing room 12. This is a rendering of what they're looking to do. So as we mentioned, some cabinets and some electrical work to outfit the space with a television and some smaller cooking appliances and refrigerator and tables and chairs. As I mentioned, all the costs would be taken care of by the Vipers. In the event that they choose to no longer use the Vollmer Center as their site for practices and games, they would be responsible for removing all of the items and returning the space to its original condition. And I think that concludes the information in my report, and I'm available should you have any questions.
Thank you. Members of Council. Deputy Mayor Capetta.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to maybe Ms. Finero, I've been involved with the Vipers in a volunteer capacity since 2010, right? I've billeted hockey players. I've done all sorts of stuff with them, and I'd like to say that I'm very much in favor of this proposal. I think that having had the privilege to go to multiple other arenas, not only in southwestern Ontario, but in Ontario general, I think it elevates not only the team itself, but also our infrastructure. So I'm very glad that this is coming forth. I've spent a lot of time in that hallway, even when I was simply coaching LaSalle hockey, and I think it's going to be something that'll make our little wing of Viper World look very LaSalle and very good. So when it's appropriate, Your Worship, I'd like to move the motion.
Thank you. Councillor C.
Yeah, I too am in support of this motion because I've seen what happens when we don't have any kind of barrier there, particularly with patrons wandering around the arena. And I think this will help a lot, not only from a practical point for the team, but for a security and safety part.
Thank you. Councillor Riccio Spagnolo.
Thank you. I'm also in favor of this as well. I think it really does enhance the energy and the vibe for the staff, for the players before they go out on ice. I think it's just a great addition, so I too am in favor for this.
Councillor Carrick.
No, I absolutely support this too. I guess the question I have is, dressing room 12, are we losing a dressing room altogether, or is that something that they've been using long? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. That is correct. Currently, that room is exclusive use for the Vipers right now. It is currently set up as a dressing room, and in the agreement with Vipers, the town has a ability to issue 48 hours notice to gain access to that dressing room. So that will no longer be available to us. But in the same breath, we have not made use of that provision up until since we've had that provision in the contract. So we haven't had to make use of it, but we are losing that ability to have that as a dressing room because it will be a functional lounge for the Viper players at this point in time going forward.
Councillor Burns.
So I was in the dressing room last Wednesday, and everything is tore apart. I guess I'm just wondering what caused the delay, or why wouldn't they be allowed to paint it and do some minor tweaking to this? Is it the fact that it wasn't approved by us first? Is that a requirement?
That is correct. The modifications to the building come before council under any circumstances. And certainly this changes the aspect of the agreement. As I mentioned, it's noted as a dressing room in the agreement, so bringing that forward to council so that they understand that they are losing their dressing room through this aspect and getting all those ducks in order so that they can properly do this in an efficient fashion. There is extensive amounts of electrical work that need to be done as well, so we want to make sure that all of that was approved by council before they proceeded with anything.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? None? Thank you for coming tonight. I don't have any specific questions for you, but thank you to you and your organization for bringing this forward. We think this is a great addition, and thank you for working with staff. I realize sometimes it takes us a little longer to get through things, but we do have certain protocols we had to go through, and I'm glad we were able to all get on the same page regarding safety and keeping that door open and all those other little things that are in this agreement. So thank you very much, and thank you to staff for bringing this forward this evening. The recommendation is that the report of the Director of Culture and Recreation dated October 21st, 2025 regarding the Vipers' request for facility modifications at the Vollmer Complex be received, and that Council approve the requested modifications to the Vollmer facility, including the construction of a wall with 2 doors at the end of the arena dressing room hallway and the installation of cabinets, electrical work, and painting in dressing room 12, with all costs borne by the Vipers. And that was moved by Deputy Mayor Acapata, support by Councillor Riccio Spagnolo. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. Item 4, Essex Region Source Protection Committee Municipal Representation. I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments. If there's none, move the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Carrick, support by Councillor Burns. All in favor? And that carries. Item 5, our proposed 2026 budget release and highlights. Our Director of Finance Mr. Langlois.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. So this report is our annual report on the release of the proposed 2026 operating and capital budget. Historically, we've released this a little bit later. This year it's a little bit earlier just because different timelines with the new Strong Mayor Act. So with that being said, with the Strong Mayor Act, in the first paragraph there, we do address that. There was some direction provided by our mayor where we'd like to keep the approach to the budget process the same as in previous years. So we've done so. The next section is public access and engagement. So we will be having an open house at the Vollmer Recreation Center on November 17th from 5 o'clock PM until 8 o'clock PM. And then also there's going to be comments welcomed on our Play Speak, where residents can ask different questions and voice their opinions on the budget. A little bit different this year compared to previous years. Like, I'm not going to go into detail. That's going to be during the budget deliberation sessions. But historically, we've put everything in our budget according to what our master plans say. For example, a 2% increase for capital improvements. That was our goal with our asset management plan, to build that up. Our fire master plan, our LaSalle Landing master plan and whatnot, a 1% increase. So, and historically during the budget deliberation sessions, when we do reduce our budget, those are some of the areas that we have reduced in the past. So a little bit different approach this year. We've made some of those reductions as part of our administrative review. So when you go to Appendix A, which kind of at a very high level outlines all the major changes from last year, there's a couple extra columns in there. So we do have our departmental expense budget and the revenue budget. And then there's a column with administrative review, and that's where we have made some of these reductions, in advance of the budget deliberation sessions to get to the proposed budget. So a little bit different this year. We've already made a lot of significant reductions, $1.2 million from the original proposed budget. They are outlined in the report, what those reductions are. And with that being said, when we do get into the budget deliberation sessions, it's important to note this is a very lean budget. There is not a lot of room whatsoever. The past number of years, we've really cut out a lot of the fat. If there is any area where we were under budget, we've reduced that budget. So if council wishes to reduce it farther, there's going to be some significant decisions that have to be made with regards to service levels. We're at the point, there isn't numbers in there where we can reduce it and continue on with the same service level. So whether that be pushing capital projects back, delaying, some of the initiatives that we want to do. We have, for example, as part of the capital budget, the asset management plan build up, rather than put 2% in a year, we're looking at putting 0.5% in a year. It's just going to take us a little bit longer to get to where we need to be, fully funded. So rather than be very aggressive right now, we understand there's a lot of unknowns with the economy right now, with what's happening across the border and uncertain times where, every day it changes. So with keeping that in mind, we have made those reductions in advance of the budget. But with that being said, this current proposed budget is going to allow us to continue to strive towards achieving all of our goals and everything that's included in our strategic plan and working towards that. So I would be happy to answer any questions at this point in time, but we will get into the weeds a little bit more during our budget deliberation presentation.
Thank you. Members of council, I know this is high level at this point, so I'm not sure if there's any comments. If there are, feel free to ask. If not, Councillor Segal?
I understand, through you, Mayor, to Mr. Langlois, what you're saying as far as the lean part of the report. But my experience has been that the residents of this town are really having a tough time managing in some specific demographics, particularly with the budget. Because this looks to be, percentage-wise, approximately about the same as last year. Would you agree with that?
Approximately. We don't have our growth-related assessment numbers finalized, but give or take, yeah.
Was there any consideration given to looking at liquid assets as far as trying to impact the overall cost of this budget, cash, reserves, debentures, anything?
Yeah, we do. We have a tax rate stabilization reserve that we put, I think it's about $100,000 a year into. If we dipped into that reserve, like actually took money out of the reserve to fund some of our budget, that's pushing that increase to future years. What we can do is reduce that to zero that we put into, so it'd reduce it by $100,000, which is about 0.25%. But if we start pulling from that reserve to fund the operating, you're gonna have to do the same next year if you wanna keep, and eventually, that, what happens is that takes all the money out of the reserves.
So we'll have an opportunity to look line by line, more specific information there in the next few weeks.
Yeah, every line in our budget is included in the document that Mr. Ferraro provided you. I think it's right, I think he put it in front of you.
Okay, because I think I have questions about some specifics and some of the
Yeah,
items.
absolutely.
So I wonder if, perhaps sometime during the week, I get a chance to sit down with your department
100%.
and ask questions.
Absolutely.
But I appreciate that, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And I encourage every member of council to have those conversations. And we've just received the budget, so you'll have lots of reading to do over the next 2 weeks and enjoy the line by line. And it's available to the public as of Friday?
Wednesday.
Wednesday?
It'll be on our website.
On Wednesday, it's on our website, so residents can also go over it and hopefully write down any questions they have and come see us Monday at the Vollmer from 5 to 8 and ask any questions that they may have. And I think it's important to note, there's always a little bit of confusion regarding the tax stabilization reserve. I personally think it's worded wrong because it sounds like you should take that money and apply it to that budget to get that number down each year. But as Mr. Langlois said, all that does is it pushes it to next year. I think the point of the tax stabilization really was for those one-offs where we needed to fund something that wasn't budgeted for. That money was there to help with that. But if we were to use those dollars towards something that's in the budget now, all we're doing is saying, okay, well, this year we won't really worry about it. Well, we'll use the tax stabilization, and then next year we will, but then we're hitting that plus more. So I think it's important that we realize the naming of that, I think we need to rename it. It's decided, it's being renamed. Because I think it does mislead some people into what it really is used for. But again, there's lots of reading and lots of things for us to go over and to discuss with administration, and again, to deliberate at our budget sessions coming up at the end of the month. If there are no other questions or comments, I do have just the recommendations that the report of the Director of Finance dated October 22nd, 2025 regarding proposed 2026 budget release and highlights be received. Moved by Councillor Reno, support. Deputy Mayor Capata, all in favor? And that carries. Item 6, Front Road Construction Update, our Director of Public Works, Mr. Osborne.
Actually, I'm going to kick it over to Mr. Capucci for the first half of the report.
Thank you. Mayor, members of council, this report here is to talk about the front road construction as an update. Like Mr. Osborne said, I'm going to just talk about the construction part of it, and there's a second aspect of the report talking specifically about the G. Craig Park at the corner of Front Road and Reham. The Front Road project is still ongoing. As of today, they are finishing up some road restoration works along Adams Lane, where the majority of the first phase of the construction project has begun. I'm also going to talk to you about some of the delays that we've had up to this point and how the project is going to finish off in the new year. So when we were designing this project, we knew that Adams Lane was going to be an issue. We broke the project up into 4 lanes. One of them was Adams Lane. The other 3 phases was along Front Road, the north section on Reham, took close to the Reham, and the last 2 sections are along between Laurier and south of Adams. So when we begun the project, we had a lot of delays and issues as it related to some of the soil. For the, let me restart. When we started the project, we realized we would have soil issues, and then when we were starting to put pipe into the ground, those issues got larger and larger, and we were about 6 weeks behind where we wanted to be. The contractor, at no fault of their own, had issues with utilities. High pressure gas mains are in the area. We also had an issue with our water main, which was 100 years old, so it was breaking and we needed to find ways and solutions around it. So the contractor took their time and was able to complete the first phase of the project. And instead of bringing in a second crew this year, we've decided that we would finish Adams Lane, restore it back to its proper status, and then in the new year, bring a second crew and finish the remaining part of Front Road with 2 crews working simultaneously, one at the north end of the project and one at the south end of the project. Originally, we weren't going to utilize this method, but to recoup some time, we both agreed that this will be the best way forward. So in the new year, you're going to see crews starting roughly in February and March at the Jerry Craig Park, as well as on Front Road at Adams Lane. And we're going to have them meeting, essentially working together in the middle. Now, even though, like I said, we've lost time this year, it just so happens that by them adding the second crew in the new year will allow us to be completed in May, the same time frame that we originally had, just starting a little bit earlier in March and allowing them to work simultaneously, which, like I said, originally we weren't going to have 2 crews working simultaneously. The result of this is the traffic pattern will be a longer section of one-way traffic in each direction. So there'll be lanes going in both directions. It'll just be longer in terms of its queue length. We didn't want this delay to happen. We were hoping to be in Front Road, and our messaging suggested that we would be in Front Road a lot sooner. And looking back, we knew the amount of problems that we had or could have going into this project, and it was like a bingo. It was like we hit every single problem we could have hit, and unfortunately, the only way to make up that time is by getting 2 crews in the new year, which LaPera has committed to and agreed to complete that work. We don't expect to see as many problems because this location of sewer installation was the deepest. It was 25 feet deep, which is significantly deep, and the type of soils that we had made it extremely difficult for them to make any sort of, noticeable progress, it felt like some days. So in the new year, we are much shallower in comparison, and the soils have changed from Adams Road to Front already, so we're hoping to continue to have that good luck. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Osborne to talk about the park.
Thank you, Michael. I'm just going to pull up some slides. Okay, I'm just going to provide council with a bit of an update on what is happening at Jerry Craig Park. So as council is aware, the one downstream end of our storm sewer outlets into a pump station that's to be located on Jerry Craig Park. In this picture here, you can see the existing park, some of the proposed storm sewers coming in here, and the new pump station and generator in this area. Now in this park, there are a number of memorial trees and bricks, associated bricks with those trees. That we've been working through to find the right solution for what to do with some of those conflicts. So we've had So this is just some of the photos of how the park currently sits right now. I think everyone is familiar with that, but put this in here just to kind of reference for council. And it's difficult to see, but the pump station's kind of going to go back in this area here where my mouse is. So it's going to be a fairly significant structure in relation to the size of the park, and it's inherently going to change the look and the feel of the park. We did ask Stantec to come up with a memorial idea or a way forward to deal with the memorials in one centralized location. They did come up with a concept for us, which is shown in plan view here. And it kind of centralizes all of the memorials into one bench. And I have a better picture on the next slide, but one bench, kind of garden area and plaque with the memorials. But given, we kind of superimposed the pump station and generator here, and this is their rendering of it. It doesn't look too bad in this picture here, but we thought it might still not be quite right with the size of the building that's going to go there. So we are looking at another option, actually, that is different from what you see here. So instead of having this memorial at the Jerry Craig Park, we looked at the idea, and we're looking at the idea of potentially putting a memorial type thing at LaSalle Landing. So this is the Riverdance building here, and the Riverdance parking lot. So this would be on there's a little knoll and path in this area here. So going forward, we thought this might do a few things for us. In addition to helping with what we have going on at Jerry Craig Park, we might be able to incorporate, or we would be able to incorporate potentially other memorials that are at Front Road that will be in future conflict potentially with some of the future plans of Front Road. They're okay where they sit today. Nothing's getting built right now in some of the areas where we have memorials, but someday they may. So this might, it kind of think of it as a mini version of what we have, the Healing Hearts garden at the Vollmer. So it's kind of a smaller version of that. And we had JPT do up a couple renderings kind of in short order for us just to give an idea. So this is two pictures here. Sorry, they kind of blend together. But the top right picture kind of shows you it's a bit of a pergola type thing with benches and then potentially memorial plaques behind. This is just kind of above view of kind of where it would sit in relation to the water. So we have more information to come back to council with specific to this with more detail and potential policy that kind of goes with it. But this is a bit newer, this idea, so we wanted to bring it to council, especially with the fact that we will be going into Jerry Craig Park next spring to actually have to start doing some of that work. I mentioned in the report that we would be doing some tree removal soon. We're actually going to push that off a bit, so we won't be altering the park too much this year still, and give us a chance to get a bit more information on this for council and bring it back and see if we can make this part possible. I'll just add too, there's potentially some naming opportunities that might come along with something like this that could help with what we're trying to take away from Jerry Craig Park. So I'm available for any questions, and then also if there's any construction questions, we can go through those too.
Thank you. Councillor Carrick, did you have a question?
So, thank you, Your Worship. So through you to Jonathan. So I guess keeping the roadways open is very important. So I will say that's kind of a construction-induced road diet, if I can use the term, at least for a few months. People do use that Jerry Craig Park to launch watercraft, whether there's a boat ramp there or not. So would this completely eliminate that? It's one of the questions.
No, it wouldn't. Like the banks of the water would stay more or less the same as they are today. But I'll just add, that is not an official launch spot, but that bank would basically stay the same. The outlet for the pipe isn't the same outlet that is now existing. It's just going to be a bit bigger, more robust.
Okay, because people are using it, I think we all know that, but last but not least, I guess, I haven't heard anything but water level predictions for the river and the flowing and the, not there is flooding, but just the potential, and I haven't heard anything yet. Usually Mr. Burney takes care of us for that, but he's obviously not here, so just, do we have any ideas or heard anything?
No, I don't dare enter the mind of Mr. Burney, so I'll leave that for him.
Just to make sure, though. 'Cause
I haven't heard really any predictions for what the water levels might do.
I have lots of questions, so I have Deputy Mayor Capata, Councillor Reno, Councillor Segan, then Councillor Burns.
I only have one, Your Worship, and this was a resident who's up on what goes on council. They saw a generator, and they started to ask me questions about diesel generator, what kind of generator, the decibel level, the noise. So if you could speak to the type of generator, is it a diesel generator? Is it something we normally see around, say, even our buildings? I just want to be able to make sure I answer the question right so that you're able to give this resident some reassurance as to what we're going to do. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Mayor. It will be a diesel generator. It will be surrounded by a bit of kind of a block wall fence, like a brick fence, as opposed to just a chain link fence or something like that to help mitigate against some of the noise. And it will really only run during power outages and for regular maintenance type things. So it's not something that's we anticipate running a whole lot, just on regular maintenance, and then if the power happens to go out and the pump station's called upon.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two questions, one for Jonathan and I think one for Michael. First of all, when it comes to memorials and the chance of maybe putting it at the landing, maybe putting it in the park, I would only request something. I just remember that when we put the parking lot in that park, there was a lot of passion concerning a couple memorial trees in there with some residents that lived very close to the actual project. So I just, I want to ensure that we really work hard with those residents to try to mitigate those issues ahead of time, ahead of the report, just because it seemed to really alter the conversation back then. And then my question for Mr. Capucci is, knowing everything's a learning curve, and I think we learned a lot about closing Front Road for a couple of days and moving traffic around a couple of blocks. I just want to make sure that I understand, with any more connections that may have to go, are we planning on closing Front Road and detouring in that type of way again? Is that going to be needed? I understand we're going to keep 2 lanes open, but is there going to be any point where residents have to be prepared to make those changes again?
Through you, Madam Mayor. The plan is not to close Front Road again, and we did learn a lot from that, and we have, Public Works met with police after too, and we've kind of changed some things and looked at, I would say, yeah, we learned a lot, and we had a lot of help with police that week as well, and as well as fire and every other department. So we do appreciate everyone's efforts there. We don't intend to close Front Road again. The whole intent of the design was to put it on the east side of the road, so we only had to close Front Road once. So instead of doing it multiple different times throughout the project, we would only do it one time and one time only. It has other challenges associated with that, but we think it was worth it for the traffic network. So knock on wood, we shouldn't have to close Front Road again unless there's some sort of emergency that comes up, and everything will be 2 lanes. As it relates to your first question with the residents next to the park, we have already had contact with them regarding this, the memorial trees and their plaquettes and everything, and we've even called some of the residents that we have their contact information for regarding this meeting, so that they would be aware of anything that's coming and any updates we have been working and sharing with those residents near the park.
Thank you. I understand that emergencies could happen, but I am happy to hear that it's not officially part of the plan to close it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Malash, through you, to Mr. Osborne. Thank you for bringing that question up, because I actually, when you're the new guy on the council, I spent a half an hour at the relative's house across the street to hear their concerns about the whole park here. Do they know that there's a potential move to LaSalle Landing?
I believe, I'm correct if I'm wrong, Mr. Capucci might have made contact with them, but one of the first orders of business is to contact those memorial family members and walk them through this, let them know that we've provided this information to council. It isn't a decision that's made in stone at this point in time, but and kind of work with those families from this point moving forward.
All right, thank you. That sensitivity is appreciated. Thanks.
Okay, Mrs. Knowles asked for a bench. I see basically where you're putting Memorial Park. That's the location she wanted it, on that little knoll on the south side of Laurier. Has she been accommodated?
We would have to make contact with her and let her know this update as well.
Okay, so no final destination for that bench has been approved yet?
I'll have to check with the operations team to
Okay.
see. I'm not 100% sure
Okay.
if she's accepted something else or not.
Hopefully you can do that. I would appreciate it. Now, down on Divine by Sacred Heart, the truck's destroyed between the road and the grass area. Is there any opportunity that we'll be going in there in the next week or so, leveling, seeding it, do it, whatever we have to do? If I could get an answer to that, I can get back to the residents.
We were made, when detour was happening, the contractor was made aware, and when we're doing our restoration work along Adams Lane, they'll be sending a crew there to kind of level, and we'll level things off there. Yep.
Okay, thank you. My final question is, as good or bad the experience was, doesn't really matter. Are we going to be able to put into Malden Road when we start that next year? And will it be at the same time frames? But are we going to be able to put in some of the similar recommendations you're doing now? Because it's going to be exactly the same at some point. You're going to be closing roads off, and nobody's going to be able to up and down. So you don't have to give me an answer now, but maybe as we go forward with that project, there could be some recommendations that how we manage the bottlenecks, like around the bridge or whatever, to some of these streets to have the other areas open.
Yeah, we've been starting, once we got council's approval to review the Malden closures, we've already been starting to look at ways we can improve traffic operations already. We've got some ideas to help implement traffic measures, so yes, we will do that, and it'll probably be part of the tender package for Malden.
That's it.
Thank you. Just want to touch on a couple of those things. Ms. Knowles, I actually ran into her yesterday at the event center, and she seemed like she was happy with whatever conversation she had with administration, so thank you for that. If we move forward with moving the memorial to LaSalle Landing, if we have a single or two residents who are really passionate about keeping it at that park, is there the option to put up a single tree somewhere there, not a full memorial like we had looked at?
I think that option may exist. I don't want to maybe commit to it at the moment, but I think overall we want to have something like what we showed here on the map, but I think, you know, given the circumstances, that sure, that maybe could be accommodated.
Thank you. And then for Front Road, thank you for the update. I appreciate it. I'm glad to hear there's 2 crews coming in the new year, because obviously we have a very big project coming on Malden, and we need to be sure Front Road is fully open and usable before we start Malden Road. So thank you for that. I appreciate that information. And I'm sure we learned a lot of lessons with Front Road. It only may have been, 4 or 5 days, whatever length of time it was, but I'm sure we learned a lot from that we can apply to this construction when it comes next summer. So I look forward to that report and seeing how we're going to mitigate some of those concerns for our residents in the Malden Road area. I don't have any further questions, so if there's no one else. Okay, the recommendation is that the report of the Director of Public Works and Manager of Engineering dated October 29th, 2025 regarding Front Road construction update be received. Moved by Councillor Richo Spagnolo, support by Councillor Carrick. All in favor? And that carries. Consent agenda has 7 items. Are there any items anyone wants to pull out and speak to? None? Okay, if we can get a mover. Moved by Councillor Carrick, support by Councillor Burns. All in favor? And that carries. Committee matters, there's one, which is the County Council highlights from October 15th, 2025. Are there any questions regarding those? If not, the recommendations that the County Council highlights dated October 15th, 2025 be received. Moved by Councillor Reno, support by Councillor Segan. All in favor? And that carries. Any questions or statements by council members? Councillor Carrick?
I have just a couple. First of all, in regards to the budgets, the 27th. So people out there watching, please show up to the meeting on the 27th, or the process. Would be much appreciated. Secondly, the roundabout out by my end there, San Jose Parkway, is really well designed and it's working great. The white curbs, you can tell that people are kind of getting used to it because there's a lot of rubber up against them. But I mean, overall, I think it's working very well. And it certainly does alleviate the pressure from my house at the other end of Heritage on the 6th. So that's very good. Thank you very much. And last but not least, it's unfortunate, but I can't be at the Remembrance Day ceremony tomorrow. As important as that is, work commitments, and we will have a ceremony at my place of work, but I will be there in spirit. So thank you.
Thank you. On that, I was approached by the developer in that area, and they were wondering if we could do an education piece for roundabouts, just as a reminder to residents how to use them. So if we can maybe schedule some social media stuff in the next month or so, that'd be great. Councillor Reno, you had a question?
So first of all, comment for engineering, much to my colleagues' comments, the new infrastructure down at Heritage looks great. I remember as I was driving up to the grand opening the other day, and I drove down Sandwich West Parkway towards the stacked, and to see the nice turning lanes and how well organized and how great it looks, I almost felt like I was somewhere else. It's very well done. So it was well worth the wait. I know some people were disappointed it took so long, but I think it was well worth the wait, and you guys did a great job. And it seemed to be flowing very well when I did make it up and through. My other question, and I don't need an answer tonight, but just as I sat and looked across this massive project, the shops at Heritage, and you can now see the colors on the building. Dollarama is only one color of green, and Shoppers Drug Mart is one color of red. And you start to realize that, it was tagged as a $200 million project. I understand that. But in the end, I'm just wondering what type of impact this may have on future budgets. I don't need an answer tonight, but I would like to just get an idea. This year in residential, we added $1 million of tax roll. Just wondering what type of role are you expecting when this project is complete? And I don't need an answer tonight.
Councillor Seguin, and then Deputy Mayor Capata.
First of all, I'd like to thank our CEO, Mr. Militia, for the excellent meeting I had with him as far as a bit of orientation, very informative. So thank you for the time that you gave me, and all the department heads. I've been able to be around just about to everybody but fire, so you're next. And because the plan was to hit the ground running, and I think you've really helped me with that, and I really appreciate it. I like the warm welcome that you gave me. Also, you kept me really busy. I mean, I've been to the Stack Pancake House, the Dairy Queen opening. I went to the short-term rental public open house, and then the neighborhood safety walk. So it was a busy week, nice first week to get me going here. But I really should commend the LaSalle Police, because the information by the officer there was outstanding as far as the safety tips and issues that when we walked through the neighborhood there. And we had about 40 people, and the information was that we only had about 5 last time they did something like this somewhere else. So kudos to the people in the Heritage area and all the others that came out because it was a great session. My wife and I both really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thank you, and I have to echo your comments, Chief. I don't know if you have anything to add to it, and thank your staff for putting that on. I did attend it last year. Unfortunately, this year it was the same night as County Council, so Deputy Mayor Capata and I couldn't join. But I really find it to be a very informative session, and you don't realize the safety tricks or hacks that they have that are just so simple to keep you safe going in and out of your house. And so I agree, and I thank you and your staff for that. I don't know if there's any comments you want to make on it. Probably not. I don't know.
No, I don't have any comments to make.
Thank you. All right, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. As a combat veteran and as a member of Branch 594 Legion, I spent 7 days at Zares. They need to be thanked. Outstanding people. Wonderful. Our community is awesome.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, there being none, we'll move on to our notices of motion. So Deputy Mayor is going to step out, and I'm going to cede the chair to Councillor Carrick.
Thank you for this motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Burns. Mayor, back to you. Yes.
You have to read it.
It says Mayor Malash to resume chair.
That's a good try.
Kidding, right? Okay, no problem.
Allow the mayor to speak to her motion.
Okay. Mayor Malash, equitable provincial support for municipally policed communities. Recommendation, Mayor Malash may move or cause to have moved that the town of LaSalle endorse the letter approved by the LaSalle Police Services Board regarding equitable provincial support for municipally policed communities, and that the letter be sent to the Solicitor General of Ontario, the Premier of Ontario, and all municipally policed municipalities in Ontario, and that a copy of this resolution accompany the letter.
Thank you for doing my job. I appreciate it. If there is a seconder, as you've stated, I
Councillor
will
Burns.
speak to the motion, if that's
Councillor
okay.
Burns did. Thank you.
Do you have the second? Okay. So I don't want to read the letter attached as it is lengthy, but hopefully everyone's had a chance to review it. It was also online for our residents to review, and I've heard on the radio, AM 800, there's been some discussions, and others have been discussing what's being proposed tonight. And really, the letter is just about equity and fairness. It's about ensuring that our municipal police officers and services have the same support as our OPP detachments. And so the letter being put forward is just speaking to that. And what I'm asking for is this letter to be sent to the Solicitor General, to our local MPPs, as well as to the Premier of Ontario and all municipally policed municipalities in Ontario, in hopes that they also support it, and we can at least get some information on how this moves forward, how we have parity in costs for policing. And so I don't know if Councillor Carrick would like to call on the police chief to see if he would like to add anything to it.
Consider it done, Chief.
Thank you. I think Mayor Malash's letter properly encapsulates the issues that certainly the small to mid-sized police chiefs have concerns about as it relates to funding of policing in Ontario. So unless there's any specific questions, pardon me, I think your letter is quite accurate.
One quick clarification, I guess, and I've heard this from Councillor Burns, and we were at the thing in Ottawa as well. So when they say that we receive funding, OPP gets the same funding, you know, through grants or whatever, so we're not getting the advantage of what they got, basically, is what we're asking for, correctly?
I'll provide some additional details. So last year, just before budget time, I was doing an environmental scan of police budgets and what chiefs and boards were asking for. And in doing that, I noticed that a number of municipal councils across Ontario were voicing concerns about the bills they were receiving from the province for policing services. And so this is not municipally run police services, that are municipalities that run their own police services, but rather municipalities that contract with the province or receive policing services from the province. And so there were 79 municipalities that publicly voiced their concerns, and that represented roughly a 26.6% budget increase across the board of those 79 municipalities. To be full and frank, there are 330 municipalities that contract their services from the province, or their policing services from the province. So this represents a 24%, it's a sample size of 24% of those municipalities. On November 28th of last year, you may remember that the provincial government announced a $77 million financial relief to municipalities who have policing services through the province. And so that was not afforded to municipalities that have their own police services. And then this year, the province announced that they were capping police increases for those municipalities at 11%. And so, yes, we do get grant funding to the tune of around $600,000 per year, and we are thankful for that funding from the Solicitor General in the province. What it doesn't properly articulate is that we have to apply for those grants and compete for those grants against other police services, including the OPP. So while the funding is being provided sort of without any strings attached, to some municipalities, those that have their own municipal policing services have to, I guess, jump through hoops to obtain that funding and compete amongst each other for that funding. So we're looking for some clarity as to that issue. I think that probably accurately explains it.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to add that I'd like to thank the mayor and members of council and the Police Services Board for bringing this forward and continuing to push for this. If nothing else, at least hopefully down the road, it provides maybe an equal playing field when it comes to funding. Maybe bring it to their attention, so thank you for that. Oh, I'm still doing this?
Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Burns, Councilor Burns.
I brought up the issue at AMO because I thought it was an important issue. So when I looked at Essex getting $450,000, basically their budget is $4 million, 10-11%. Lakeshore last year, budget of $7.5 million, received $750,000. We didn't receive anything. And again, as the Solicitor General stated, we get funding in other areas. And Chief, thank you for, I think it was $606,000 that Anthony Liardi was quick to tell me, because I don't think they like the question, but it does beg the fact that we have been 20 years plus being underfunded by the province compared to OPPs. And again, this year, they got another 11%, which we did not get. And what was disturbing about last year, we had to take that hit in our budgets, which meant roughly 2% increase, where the town of Lakeshore took the $750,000 and reduced their budget so they can claim they had the lowest increase in Essex County. I think we would have been very, very similar to theirs had we got the $900,000. So I thank you, Your Worship, for pursuing it further, because it does put every municipality that has their own service in trouble. It doesn't matter to Thunder Bay, to Timmins, to Belleville, Brockville, wherever. So I think it's an important issue for us, and it's important that Mr. Ford quits downloading to us and making new requirements, both in police and other departments, with no expenditures given to us. And it makes what we're coming forward into the budgets that much harder to get down to a realistic figure that we all can live with. So thank you for that, Chief. I appreciate it. Your Worship, for bringing it forward again. I certainly appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Burns. Anyone else like to make comments? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? That passes unanimously. I'm going to turn it back over to the mayor.
Thank you. All right, item M is our closed session report out from October 28th, 2025. So on October 28th, 2025, council moved into closed session in accordance with section 239, section 2, subsection C of the Municipal Act to discuss two property matters being proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. First was regarding the property matters in Riam Prairie. Council provided direction to administration. And the second regarding the property matters for the proposed Laurier Fire Station, Station 3. Council received information. For bylaws, we are going to give a first, second, third reading and finally pass to the single bylaw on tonight's agenda, 2025-093, being a bylaw to authorize the purchase of lands municipally known as 128 Ellsworth Ave, LaSalle. Move. Deputy Mayor Capata, support Councillor Reno. All in favor? And that carries. Our confirmatory bylaw 2025-095 be given a first, second, and third reading and finally passed. Moved by Councillor Burns, support by Councillor Regis Spagnuolo. All in favor? And that carries. The list of meetings are below. Don't forget, tomorrow, Remembrance Day, 11 a.m. here at the Cenotaph, and budget open house next Monday, 5 p.m. at the Vollmer. Have a good night.